Welcome back. Ed Martin here on the Pro America Report. You know, you've heard me talk, of course, a million times about General Flynn, about Roger Stone, Sidney Powell's book, Licensed to Lie, which is extraordinarily good. LicensedToLie.com is the website. You can get a copy. It's right here on my desk. I'm looking at it. She's amazing on this. But here's the thing that's happened in the last, maybe 25 years, almost since I went to law school, started law school 25 years ago, but it seems to have accelerated. And I did a conference call this morning with some inventors, patent holders, and they were talking about the policy problems of the administrative state, which was basically the discretion of the patent board to jerk around inventors in favor of big business and other things. Well, what caught my eye was a story. Alan Dershowitz, who I have often admired, he's one of the smartest lawyers around. He doesn't need anybody's money or fame, so he doesn't care. I think he used to say he's a Hillary supporter, but he would say things about Trump and about how stupid some of the Democrats' attacks were. Well, I saw this story where he's a lawyer for a gentleman who's with us now, and in this case, Ari Teman he's basically been targeted. And what I wanted to talk to him about was the growing concern that we should have about the impact of what's going on and how people can be targeted. It's more about personal and political. And so welcome, first of all, Ari, to the program. How are you today?
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm depending on the hour of the day, I'm doing okay. It's hope and despair waves, I guess, when you're in this situation.
Yeah.
Right now,
you're the founder of you're a tech guy. You're a founder of an AI company, GateGuard, and so. But walk me through, our listeners through what happened. I mean, what is the dynamic here where the discretion was out of place? I mean, can you walk us through that?
So GateGuard came from this idea of what if an intercom was smart enough to track who's coming into a building. So people who are managing multifamily buildings, they're not at the building. Often, they don't realize that somebody's running an illegal hotel. The internet has sort of opened up a floodgate of all kinds of behavior. And then there's your more traditional illegal behaviors, your drug dens, your brothels, your dormitories, where a 2-bedroom apartment becomes a place for 20 people to live. And the property owners are liable for what happens in their building. And there's also, at least until New York completely locked down the ability to raise rent last June, a huge incentive to evict somebody who is abusing a rent-regulated unit and running an illegal hotel, because you can make a $250,000 profit by refinancing the building after you get them out and renovate the unit. And so we created GateGuard, which tracks the tenants, the guests, the staff, the vendors, everybody coming into the building, and also turns these 100-year-old buildings into doorman buildings. You can now let people in through your phone. You can give them a visitor code. So it becomes a great amenity. And we were across all spectrums of buildings, but we attracted what's commonly known as the slumlord clientele in New York City, the guys who buy buildings for the sake of evicting often elderly and vulnerable people. Unfortunately, it's a perfect example of where a liberal government means well, but the laws only incentivize people to game the system in a way that harms people, right? So because you have created laws that say I can't raise the rent unless I evict people, you're going to attract people who want to profit by kicking vulnerable people out of their homes, right? Sometimes they offer money to buy out, but it's never a good deal. If it was a good deal, then there'd be no profit in it for these guys. And so New York became very adversarial, and you see a lot of anger, a lot of hate. Ami Horowitz, who does these great, guerrilla videos where he goes around and interviews people, interviewed people in New York about why there's a rise in anti-Semitic attacks. And almost consistently they said, well, it's because these landlords are kicking us out of our own homes, out of our own communities. I'm not justifying the attacks, but New York's regulation that was meant to help people has created this very adversarial relationship. And I didn't know this going in. I was a techie, but not in real estate. And these vendors are also not great at paying their vendors, because every dollar they save is worth, a multiple in the refinancing. And so we tried to collect from a handful of slumlords. The guy who filed the case against me here is in the top 10 worst slumlords in New York City. New York keeps a list of the worst landlords in terms of violations and complaints and such. And he went to his bank and he went to the local precinct. He said, I don't have a business relationship with these guys. I don't have a contract. That's a lie. He did. And a cop showed up we're based in Miami Beach on July 3rd at 4 p.m. Probably not a coincidence. And threw me in federal detention center in Miami for 5 days, knowing, of course, that the courts were closed. And we thought that this would be over, that the young prosecutor would realize we have a contract with this guy. The contract allows us to draft their checking account for money owed, that our attorneys in email, on the phone, and I over messenger and email had repeatedly tried to collect from these guys, had linked to the contract, had sent them itemized lists of the amounts of money that they owed. It was nothing underhanded. And they had arrested me for counterfeiting checks because this guy went to his precinct and said this guy just like stole our money. They thought I was a dumb criminal who just counterfeited checks.
Wow.
To me, that's like the most, to me, that's the most mind-boggling thing. Like, they didn't make the logical leap from, wait, you built a face recognition tracking intercom, but we also think you're stupid enough to walk into a bank full of cameras with counterfeit checks. So they indict me, and the indictment says counterfeit check, counterfeit check, counterfeit check. It doesn't say anything about authorization. It doesn't say anything about the contract. And they do what Professor Dershowitz called a constructive amendment. He didn't invent the term, but it's a constructive amendment. They change the case after trial begins and say, no, basically they go, you didn't have authorization. Then they realize that these guys literally were emailing us copies of the contract, asking questions, and then approving and signing up. So then they go, oh, no, you have a multi-page contract, and that's confusing to people, which SDNY just had a ruling yesterday saying that multi-page contracts are totally fine. And, Airbnb is a multi-page contract. We borrowed Airbnb's contract and changed it up a bit, but we were a broke startup. We didn't invent the structure of the contract.
So tell me why is it because the powerful, meaning in Washington, I mean in New York, the big landlords and the banks that fund them and all would be the ones that have influence over the Southern District of New York, the federal prosecutors? Is that the point here that I tell people is we've gotten so far from there's always been prosecutorial misconduct, so there's always an opportunity for somebody to act poorly. What we've come towards though is if you're the big hitters in a town, then you can get justice for you, and the little guy is stomped. Is that what Dershowitz thinks happened here?
Well, I'm not going to speak for Professor Dershowitz, and he's certainly not shy about speaking for himself. So, you're welcome to interview him.
Yeah.
But I will say this: the government doesn't dispute, or they did and then they didn't, that their lead witness, a major landlord in New York, perjured himself on the stand in my case. Taking aside the details of my case, you grow up and you're taught what America is in middle school, and then your adulthood is a gradual disenchantment with realizing that our values and what's actually executed are two very different things. And, one would think that, there can't possibly be any court case out there really that's more valuable than the integrity of the justice system. In other words, once you have your lead witness, your main complaining witness, the guy who started the case, perjuring himself on the stand, once you have the prosecutor hiding evidence, that's not a fair trial. Nobody would look at that and say, well, that's fair, and that's how we want our system to work. But as you referenced Sidney Powell, there's massive amounts of examples. There's books and books on prosecutors who just willfully hide exculpatory evidence, which is what happened here, and convict you and know that, if you're going to fight, it's going to be an appeal. It's going to cost you another $1 million by the time you're done.
Yeah. So Ari, we just got about a minute left. What's next? What happens next? Are you still in the process? Are you appealing? What's next?
Yeah, we're going to file an appeal. An amazing appellate attorney who's a student of Professor Dershowitz is going to join to handle that. I'm facing sentencing. It could be brutal. I think the recommended sentence is 30 months. We're hoping, obviously, that there's some mercy. I've assisted law enforcement a number of times, and so maybe there's a sort of a bonus for cooperation. But it's just astounding to me. I build my clients according to a contract. The government concedes that the contract exists, concedes that they entered the contract, And now the idea that there's a multi-page contract is some reason for me to sit in prison for 2.5 years.
I'm telling you, and Ari, I'm sorry I got to run, but Dershowitz, when he writes about this, is so clear about how the system is has been really misused. So hang in there, keep us informed on it. Thank you for coming on with us, and I will talk more about this topic too in the next couple of weeks. I've got some other ideas, but I got to run right now. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. It's Ed Martin here on the Pro America Report. Be right back.